one of the things that does scare me about this is that I see electrification as a way that these big companies are shutting down the small shops. They're small owner operators. They're making everything. You can't work on electric vehicles. No. It's scary. It's batteries. It's electric. It's dangerous. You can't work on it, so only our shops can work on our own vehicles. Oh no, you're out of business because we're mandating that all vehicles be electric by 2035 and then you can't work on it. So, oh no, I guess all these shops have to go out of business, and we're going to be the only ones that have mechanical shops that work on people's cars. Oh no, it's so unfortunate. They're full of shit. They know that they're doing that intentionally, and part of the things is we said if we're doing the kit, and we're doing these trucks, number one, it's great for us because then people can work and service and we'll get more sales. But also, as a fundamental core, if we start training up these kits and we start making these kits repairable, well, then it saves all those automotive shops.
I'm talking with Chace Barber, founder of Edison Motors. And Edison, if you're not aware, I mean, obviously, if you're coming from the radio show, you already know. But if you're just jumping on the podcast here, go back and listen to the podcast version of the radio show. We're talking all about diesel electric trucks, but we're also talking about the industry. We're talking about right to repair and more, and maybe even how Edison has exposed some government corruption. You know, we got to get into all of that. So, Chace, welcome back onto the show.
Hey, you betcha.
Awesome. So before the break there, we were talking a little bit about like kind of what you think is wrong with the industry as a whole. You know, you were talking about, you know, suits investing in things and not willing to invest with you if you don't have some MBA in business or whatever, right? And you've run into that as a business owner now. You've got to see that side of the world. What's that like?
Oh my God. We have told every venture capital list that we talk to just basically shove it up their own, like, these guys are one of the things that's wrong with the world of these EV companies. And you've seen the founder of Nikola Motors. He was talking about how investors took hold of the company and it wasn't his thing that they wanted to do, but investors took hold of it, made crazy promises and warped the company and made them put in a bunch of people that didn't have experience, that drove the company into the ground. And I almost side with him on that point because I can see it, because people have tried to do the same thing to us. Different investors have approached Edison Motors saying, hey, we want to buy in 20-30% of your company. We like what you're doing. And I don't know about that, guys. And just give us 5 minutes. And you talk to these people and you realize what is wrong with the world real quick. One guy, for example, said, you need to get all of your parts foreign made, all of them. Just get it all made in a foreign country, and it'll get you the cheapest price. Get it out there. Like, no, that's not what we want. That's not how you control quality. And then other guys are like, hey, we need an exit strategy of 2-3 years. And we had a guy that said, it doesn't matter what you say. I want you to promise that you're going to be building 5,000 to 15,000 trucks a year within 2-3 years, 3-4 years. He's like, whether you can achieve it or not, we're going to promise that, because we're going to get that money. It'll get people excited. We'll use that money to build it up to look like we're scaling. We'll start just slamming out trucks and it'll look like we're scaling up. And then we can IPO. We're going to be building 20,000 trucks a year. We'll pump those numbers up and we'll get a shit ton of money at IPO. And that's not the way to do it, though. That's shitty. That's just lying to people to create a false sense of future profit, and you're skipping all of the important steps like research and development. I said, you got to go slow. You're building something new. You got to build 1. You got to build then 2. Now we're going to build another 8 trucks. Now that we've kind of in the final stages of prototype testing, we've learned a lot with our first truck. We'll build 8 to 10 trucks next year. And we'll really dial those in, as well as we're building a few pickup truck retrofit kits. We're going to dial them in. We're going to go slow, and we're going to do it right. That doesn't wow investors, but it makes a better long-run company, because you look at companies like Nikola Motors, who rolled a ton of trucks out, hundreds of trucks out, and they all had to get massive recalls. And I think most of all those trucks are still sitting there because the recalls were so big that they couldn't even fix them, and they just basically parked all of the trucks that they made. That's not a solid way to run a business. And yeah, Nikola is worth $40 billion, and they literally you heard about that, where they didn't even have a working truck. They brought a truck up to the top of the hill, they released the brakes, pushed it down the hill, filmed a video like it was working, and then told all these investors that they had a working electric truck. They got like a $30-40 billion share valuation, raised billions of dollars on fake promises that their truck ran, and then fake promises that they were going to hit goals that they really just didn't achieve. And we had investors telling us to make fake promises to do. You could see that seems like what they're doing with Nikola, just so those investors could invest $20-30 million and then make that money back. Like, that's not a good product. That's not a good investment. That's not innovative. And then you got the government just throwing billions of dollars at EV, clean tech, startup companies that's going to things that aren't being delivered, aren't being produced. And it seems like a way to funnel people's money into their own pocket. And I'm not participating in it. And it makes raising investment money pretty hard. I'm still living in my parents' basement. We're still working in their backyard. We still driving old trucks that are breaking down, like old pickups, old cars. But I would rather live in my parents' basement for the next 3 years than take one goddamn penny of that money.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, so you're seeing this side of the business that I think even a lot of my listeners aren't aware happens. And even to me, hearing the scale of that and the scale that happens at is mind-blowing. And, how do you, and I know you're still, you're running the business, but how do you look at, like, keeping control of your business in that sense? Is the only way really to keep control of your company to not outsource to venture capitalists? Is that what you're saying?
You know what? We're working on, I like the crowdfunding. We did that to fund the business right at the start. We did 2 rounds of that. And then the fans of Edison Motors were the ones investing. And that, like, they were people that listened to what we were saying online and said, yes, I believe that's the right way to do it, built from the ground up by people that know the product, that aren't selling it out, that it may take longer, but I'm willing to throw in $500, $100, whatever they were able to do. And then the company is actually owned by our fans, and there's no single large shareholder that can control anything other than myself and my business partner who started it. But there's nobody else in here but us, and we have our vision that we're going to achieve, and we're not going to let a venture. But that's almost how you have to do it. But that means that you don't have a lot of money. Like, we would be way more comfortable off. Like, I'll be honest with you. We could be very, very comfortable right now. Like, have you seen, I forgot the one EV company. I want to say Canoe, but don't quote me on that. Maybe someone will have to do some research. There was one EV company where what the CEO spent annually on his private jet maintenance and operating expenses. His private jet for the CEO operating expenses were more than the entire company's revenue. Like, why are you spending more on your private jet than your entire company makes? Like, that's not the time to have a private jet, guys. Like, you're just wasting money at that point. Holy.
Yeah, like, wow. And you're not cruising around on a private jet. You're investing everything probably back into your business. And I mean, you got to do this stuff on a kind of a tighter budget, like you were saying. And I love that you mentioned that you are fan funded. That to me is really cool. Is there a way for folks listening right now? Is there a way for people to go support you?
Not right now. They like a merch, or if they get like one of those pickup kit reservations kits, that helps a lot. We're dealing with issues. We're trying to get, so we raised $1.5 million in crowdfunding to do all of this development up until this point, and that $1.5 million has been getting us by this entire time. We tried to approach the government for crowdfunding, and they are just digging in their heels. They told us that they want a larger investor to own it because then they could control, like, this is the government, the Securities Commission, telling us that we would be way more comfortable if a larger investor owned part of you, because then somebody's going to watch what you say and do, and you're not going to do anything foolish or say anything foolish, which a lot of it, I think, had to do with what we said on the MNP thing with that government grant scandal. We can get into that if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is no investor that would have told us to do the things we did. They would have all told us, shut up, take the money, and shut up. Like, and then the government's like, yeah, you should have one of those large investors so that you don't don't say those things.
Wow. So tell me about the sort of the scandal that you exposed within the government. And I mean, it showed a massive conflict of interest, correct?
Yeah, there is a massive potential. You can assess for yourself. I'm just going to say everything's opinion because they've got real expensive lawyers.
Right, not legal advice, right? No.
No. Just for my personal experience, our lawyer that helped us out said to use qualifying words for everything. But so in my personal experience, basically, here's what happened. We submitted to, let's start at the very start. So the government of British Columbia hired this company, MNP, to recommend future grant fundings in the EV zero-emission vehicle space. So basically, they said, hey, how much money should we give out and where should that money go? And what kind of companies should receive that so that we can improve our zero-emission vehicles? And they paid MNP, this company, to write that report. MNP wrote it, submitted it, and then the government said, okay, well, you know what? We're also going to hire MNP to administer those grants.
Wow.
So they hired the company that recommended the grants to then decide which companies who submit grant applications are going to receive the funding and how much funding they're going to receive. And then, so we applied for one of those grants after that MNP actually administered. And then after that, MNP reached out to us and we had no clue, never heard of MNP in their life. So I don't even know how they heard about us until we submitted the grant. And they reached out and said, hey, we would love to do grant writing proposals for you. And we would love to they do financial accounting and they do other things. And like for businesses, they're just a big accounting firm, or like a giant monopoly of like an accounting, oligopoly of an accounting firm.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we want to handle all your accountants. And also we want to write your grant applications for you. Also, we administer grant applications for you. So in other words...
So hold on, back that up. So the people who administer the applications also write the applications?
That's right. If you pay them a 20% success fee, they will write applications for you. They just wanted 20% of the amount of money that they gave you you got in the grant. Now, they don't always do the same grant that they administer. They said, oh, well, we technically don't write grants that we administer, although we've got some serious doubts about that. But it was very much like, hey, you need to hire us for huge fees. You should hire us for this. If you're with us, we award grants. Hint, hint.
Wow, that is incredible. I mean, just to think about what it takes for that to even happen in the first place, right? Now
here's the other thing, too. The government agency that is giving all this money out, guess which company does the financial audits of the government agency giving this money to the company to then spend? The same company that's spending the money is then auditing the Legislative Assembly to see how they spend the money that they're getting to spend. Like, what the amount of conflict of interest in that is just insane. And it's not just us. You see the EV world, like, how much of this EV world, like, have you seen, like, the thing with Stellaris or Stellantis or anything like that? Like, you start looking into it, and it is absolutely criminal. Like, Stellantis, the government of Canada gave them, don't quote me exactly on the numbers, but it was around $14 to $16 billion in funding to build an EV battery plant. That was through funding and grants and incentives. And then you see things like Stellantis gave a performance incentive of $2 billion. Then they gave another dividend of like $4 billion back to shareholders. And then they did like a share buyback to give money back to shareholders by propping the value of another $5 billion. And if you add up the amount of money that they gave in performance incentives, share buybacks, dividends, it almost equals the amount they got to fund their battery production facility of taxpayer money. So basically, they're like, hey, here's a bunch of money to build your production facility. And they're like, wow, thank you. We'll build that with this money, but we'll take this other money and give it back to our shareholders. So in other words, it's just going back to other, like, and then the manufacturers in North America start bitching about China. And they're like, well, China gets subsidized. Well, we subsidize ours. How come the Chinese car costs $20,000 for that EV Chinese car, and then ours costs $60,000 to $80,000? Oh, maybe it's because they actually use the money for research instead of share buybacks.
Yeah, well, and that, and I mean, even
that's exactly what's happening, but like it feels to me like that's what's happening.
Well, yeah, and you've got quite the position to be able to see it kind of on a ground level where a lot of folks don't get that visibility with it, and you're not afraid to talk about it too, which is also something I think a lot of folks maybe are a little more hesitant. Like you were saying, the shareholders telling them, hey, maybe back off, just take the money, right? And
well, if you had a large investor, any large investor that was about the money would have said, hey, how about you shut up, pay the 20%, and then take it. So that's 20%. We'll do a $10 million grant. You give them $2 million, and then you put $8 million in your pocket, and that's an extra $8 million for you instead of going down the road you did, which exposed it. And then guess what? We still haven't gotten a single grant. Like Edison Motors has not taken a single dime of taxpayer money because I'm not participating in that corrupt system. It's just, but then again, it also feels like the other part is that now, because we're not, you see, government is now giving money to our competitors who are playing these kind of weird games with taxpayer money, and now their trucks are being subsidized and purchased. So now we have to compete, and it's so frustrating. We are the only truck manufacturer in British Columbia, Canada, building electric semi-trucks, heavy vocational electric semi-trucks. And now our government is funding our foreign competition. Like, we have to compete against our government funding our competitors. And you're like, this is so frustrating that I'm paying taxes to fund my competitors' trucks.
Wow. Well, and remember, this is the same government telling you, oh, yeah, it's all 100% about the environment. 100%, which if, like what you're saying, what you see happening on the ground level, if that's happening, that to me sounds more like it's about lining somebody's pockets than anything to do with the environment.
It's exactly what it feels like. Like, I'll give you one crazy example for grants that looked into. It was Eagle Graphite Mine. So a mining company was listed. Remember that report I said that they wrote for funding recommendations?
Mm-hmm.
That company, Eagle Graphite, hired MMP to do their financial audits as a publicly traded company, which cost thousands upon thousands of dollars to do these audits. And then they then recommended them in this thing. Then they received a grant for like $300,000 for this mine, because they said graphite can be used in batteries. Why don't we fund a graphite mine? Then Eagle Graphite then took that and they put out like share release and be like, our project is backed by the government. Look how solid our mine is. Even the government is funding our mine, to make shareholders think that that mine was a very solid investment. So we spent $300,000 to a company to do research, who then said, look, the government's funding our mine. We can raise money for our mine because now the investors think the mine is more likely if the government's actually funding the mine. And then guess what happened? The company went totally bankrupt and everybody lost their money or whatever. People lost a ton of money. But like, that's the level of hire the company that does the grants, that does the recommendations, and then promote that, even though it wasn't the government actually giving the money. It was a private company that they hired. Like, just insane levels of just with taxpayer money, and being on the inside and seeing all these things happen is so frustrating. And I don't know what else to say, but it's, once you're on the inside, a lot of all of these things, you can tell it's not about the environment. They say it is. It's about trying to find ways to put money in their own pocket.
Yeah. Wow. And again, I appreciate you being vocal about it and saying it, because someone's got to say it. And it takes some cojones, I think, to go out there and say it when you're, like you said, the government, well, now they're subsidizing your competitors and foreign competitors at that too. So no, I think there's really, what you're saying is really important. And I think what people need to do, if you're listening to this right now, is go over to your website and go get some t-shirts or do something to support Edison Motors, because you're playing definitely, the harder game. You're saying, hey, we're not going to take that funding because it goes against our morals, and you're not willing to cave on your morals just for the sake of, leaping that extra stone forward, So I think, if you listening to this agree with what Chace is saying, you got to do what you can to support a company like this, because we need more guys like Chace. We need more companies like Edison. So now, Chace, I want to shift the conversation here too a little bit and talk about, and it's still tangentially related to some of the things going on in the industry, but let's talk a little bit about right to repair and why you're so passionate about that and why that comes through in every little aspect of the design of your trucks.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of right to repair. I believe that I think a lot of the middle class is getting screwed over. And I know this from the trucking industry, so I know it's in farming or heavy equipment, but let's just say trucks, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be an owner-operator, could build a good life for his family. The first truck we ever bought when we started our business, we bought it for $5,000, truck and trailer. It was a 1969 Kenworth. We put that to work, and we still actually work it. I went out and picked up some shit with it the other day. But the guy we bought it off of, Bob Murphy, bought it brand new back in the day, and he drove one truck until he retired. He repaired it, he worked on it, and that one truck got him through the entire career. He bought it for $18,000, and he kept it for 30 years of hauling logs. For almost 40 years of hauling logs.
Wow.
And that was an example of what a middle class could do. See,
Mm-hmm.
It used to be as an owner-operator, you would buy a truck, and you'd talk to the old-timers, and that was a way to a middle class, upper middle class even, where you could give a family a really good life, because you buy the truck, you make the payments, and then once the payments are gone, well, now you've got a truck that you can operating for the next 15, 20 years. Now that extra, with a new truck payments around $5,000 a month, so that's an extra $5,000 a month that those small businesses could put in their pockets. And they were reliable, they worked, you could work on them yourself. But now these new trucks are getting so expensive and so impossible. So when we were growing our trucking company, obviously people thought we were crazy, and we thought we were crazy with that old 1960s truck. Like, what are you doing with a 50-year-old truck out here working every day? And we thought, yeah, that's probably true. We should buy a new one. And then all of a sudden, we worked that truck and the other truck, but then we realized that some real funky stuff was going on that was making me upset as an owner-operator, because I was losing way more money on the new truck. For example, turn signals. The turn signal on that new Kenworth was like $400, and it was molded, and it was built into the dash, and it goes, well, I can't throw the truck out because I have a bad turn signal. I'll have to buy the $450 part. It's off warranty.
Mm-hmm.
High beam switch, that's integrated into the turn signal, $400. My turn signal broke on my 1969, and I was able to just take it out with a few wires, resolder it, put it back together. And even if I had to buy it, the new turn signal, I asked for a quote, was $50 compared to $400. And that's a metal turn signal back then that you could service yourself. And it's $40 over the counter compared to the plastic one, which plastic has to be much cheaper to manufacture, I'm assuming, than metal. And that's $400. And you see, it's this, you got a captive market. I think somewhere along the lines, and as they're trying to extract this money, they realize you don't throw out a $300,000 truck over a $400 turn signal, and it's a death by 1,000 cuts to an owner-operator. So what happens is that's $400. Now that rocker switch is $80 instead of $4. Like, all those little things that keep going add up onto the price. Or you've got a computer fault program, bring it in, that's a $300 diagnostic fee. And eventually you get so frustrated, you realize you're spending more on parts that you have to go and buy a new one, and you run it under warranty. And then after warranty, you hand it back in, and they throw it to somebody, and then that person just throws it back out after a few years after that. But it traps people and owner-operators and small business in this constant debt cycle. And then what do you see happen? They're leveraged to their tits, or they're constantly in debt. That money then is going to the finance company. It's not going to the small business owner's family or employees. And then you hit a turn in a recession, and now that the only way to do it is debt and constantly being in a new truck, now you hit a downturn in the economy, and a bunch of people go broke, and the big companies come in and scoop them up. And it's largely draining the middle class, and you see it in tractors, everything. I really think that all of these parts that are super expensive, parts that can't be serviced, expensive service work, computer that can only be done, is draining the middle class out, because we felt it as owner operators buying new trucks. It was actually one of the reasons I got so mad at the planned obsolescence in new trucks that we just started rebuilding old trucks. We would take a whole set of frame rails, and I would just rebuild an old 1970s truck and put those into our fleet. And we had way more uptime. We had extra cash. It was a lot more comfortable with those newer or older trucks that had a new rebuild done than it was any new truck. And that's kind of how we got into truck building, and that's how Edison slowly started.
Well, and I love that commitment to the right to repair. You know, for me, as just a hobbyist who likes to wrench on project cars in the garage too, you know, I run into that even with my daily driver. Oh, it's a, you know, purpose-built part. You're not going to find it at the auto parts store. You got to order it. But the difference with the daily driver is, you know, that, you know, oh, some minor part broke. I can live without it for a little bit, but you as a trucking operator, you've got rules, you got inspections, you got regulations you got to adhere to, like that turn signal. You couldn't just keep doing business without a turn signal, obviously, you know? Yeah,
and a logging truck's $3,000 to $4,000 a day in revenue. You're not going to give up $3,000 in revenue to save $400 on a turn signal by trying to do it cheaper. So you just pay the price, and that is what it is, and it sucks.
Yeah. Now, and we touched on this a little bit during the radio show, but tell me how the trucks you're building now, the new trucks like Topsy, for example, how that incorporates that notion of right to repair, you know, and ease of repairability.
So with our mechanics and our experience working on those old trucks have such common parts, and they're everywhere. And like our local parts store, so we just started running to our local parts store, electrical store, and we just started grabbing parts off the shelf. I needed a part. I went off and got one of those common parts. So little bit of background on right to repair for the trucking industry. It's really different than the automotive industry. A lot of people don't know this, but parts were standardized for 40, 50 years in the trucking industry, and the trucking industry had right to repair as a fundamental ingrained principle. I think it was actually done by the U.S. military, I believe, and the U.S. government. We noticed after World War II, it was brought in. There's standardization of trucks. We noticed what we did to the Germans in the war. We bombed the hell out of their factories. That was one of the first things we did, shut down their factories. And then they were worried about the Soviets. So the U.S. government looked and said, well, what would the Soviets do to us? They'd bomb the shit out of our truck factories. Trucks are so critical for national defense and for just people not starving to death. If the trucks stop rolling, grocery stores run out of food. People run out of fuel. If they bomb the factories, we need to be able to go out to any truck, grab a part, and then throw it onto any other truck. So if our factories get destroyed, we can still service these trucks, keep the thing going in the event of a war, and keep going. So that's why you see a Kenworth from 1955 still has the exact same brake pot that can go onto a Kenworth from 2023. It's the exact same brake pot. It slides in there. The brake shoes are the same. The slack adjusters, I mean, there's automatic slack adjusters, but they bolt up the exact same way, same pins. A turn signal that's in my 1962 Kenworth was the same turn signal that was up until like 2010s in Western Star semi-trucks. So that same turn signal from the 60s that I said was so cheap, common, and easy to repair lasted all the way till 2010 in a totally different brand. The gauges, doesn't matter if you go with Freightliner or whatever, you could switch them over because that right to repair was so important. And over the last, really since the 1990s and the fall of the Soviet Union, they've been laxing on a lot of that. They've been bringing in computers. They've been realizing that they can extract more money. And I think personally that is absolutely terrifying, because now in that pursuit of profit, we've shipped so much manufacturing to China that, remember when COVID and we had a part supply issue, how many trucks actually went down? That freight rates went super through the roof. There was a logistics backlog, and part of that was that parts weren't getting here to service trucks, and they couldn't work on trucks, and they couldn't fix trucks, and that was just a small blip. Could you imagine what would happen if China went into a trade war with the US and said, hey, you're getting no more parts, we're shipping no truck parts whatsoever to the United States. You couldn't go out to any wrecker yard and pull a part off of this truck or a part off of this truck and get going. Like, China invades Taiwan, our trucking industry grounds to a halt. Millions of people would starve to death within months. Because what do? You can't, like, right to repair should be so critically important to fundamentally our entire security of the nation of North America, and it's essential to the middle class, and we're getting rid of it just so we can show increased profits on shareholder balance sheets, and we're standing up against that. I don't care what we do. We're going to do it the long way. It's the right thing to do.
Absolutely, because, I mean, you look at the trucking industry here in North America as a whole, and, I mean, that is literally every single thing in your refrigerator right now came in on a truck. It came in on a truck. The wood that built the framing in your house probably came on a truck in some way, shape, or form, and maybe a logging truck just like Chace's originally, right when they cut those trees down and they bring them to the mill. All of that is so important. And to me, as Americans as a whole, and I say that just in general, we need to be self-sufficient, whether you're in Canada or the United States, that's irrelevant, but we need to be self-sufficient as a whole in such a way that if something happens, like you were saying, Chace, if something political happens in a country far away, we don't starve, right?
Yep, like literally, is nobody talking about that? I know they say, like, we're sending all of this billions of dollars for Patriot and defense and missile systems to Taiwan, and we're giving Taiwan billions and billions of dollars to resist China. If we have to go to war with China, we will. Okay, but if we do, millions of people will starve to death just because the trucks aren't delivering gas, they aren't delivering fuel, they aren't delivering food. Like, guys, it's not good that we ship all of that manufacturing over there, and now we have no choice. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's so much worse that we looked for parts in North America. So you see some of our TikToks, we actually had to go to China to get some of these parts. So I know people are going to say, aren't you being hypocritical? You literally have all these videos where you're going to China and getting these parts. Yeah, they're not made in North America. We spent months looking for anybody in North America who was making these, willing to sell it. And I can tell you from the inside, after months of looking for these parts made in North America, can't find them. You literally have no choice but to go over there. So we went over there, we inspected them. They're great. We found some companies that made it the way we wanted it to, with like, hey, I want those parts, like for the 3-in-1, they should be swappable so I can change the parts inside so you don't have to replace the whole box. You can take the cover off. I want it with common contactors that you can find. And they did that for us. But we couldn't get that done here.
Wow.
That should scare people. That should really scare people. When they say, why did you go to China for the parts? Think about how I just felt about China and then having to go and do that.
And obviously, if the means and the money and the time and availability was such, you would probably prefer at the end of the day, on a long enough timeline, bring all that manufacturing, in theory, in-house, right?
Oh, I would. If we had the money and we could raise that kind of billions of dollars that other companies can, but for a company that's still in my parents' backyard, we got to go where we got to go. It's I'm just scared. It is something that honestly does scare me, and it seems so short-sighted that we did that just so we could have wicked good profits and some real rich people for a while.
And the way you said it, I mean, wow. Now, another thing I want to get to here, and if people listening to this, want to get some of that repairability perhaps in an older vehicle that they have, you've got the retrofit program too. Tell me a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so I believe fully that you should keep something as long as you can and repair it rather than replace it. And we notice a lot of this trend to EVs is that the EVs are kind of junk. They last a few years. So we said, so many people were asking us and say, hey, I know you're doing the semi-trucks. Why don't you do the pickups? And we looked at it and we're like, well, we can use the same inverters. Instead of using 5 inverters, I'll use 2 inverters. Instead of using 4 batteries, I'll use 2 of the same batteries. It'll allow us, the axles will just be a smaller version, and we could do the same thing in a pickup with axles, the same way as we can with repairing a semi-truck. And we kind of went out there and we're like, we don't have any money. And so many people were asking and said, hey, if you guys are willing to fund these projects, we will put our development and our time, and we'll hire a couple extra guys to focus on those pickup kits that you want. And that's one of the ways that people supported us. I am so amazed that we had hundreds of people, actually, a couple hundred people came out and reserved a pickup kit on their website. We said it's $250. It's non-refundable because that money is literally going to build this. We don't have investor money. That money is going to the development. And people supported it. They reserved that kit. And instead of having to go to venture capital, we were people that wanted the good product, supported the development of the good product. So we were able to focus on making a thing that's really repairable and simple. And now those new pickup axles are showing up. I believe we just got the email on Friday. They should be here the end of the month. And we've got a couple trucks, 4 or 5 pickup trucks is the first ones that we're ordering. We'll put them in there. We'll do the testing. We'll do the same thing we did with Topsy, work those kinks out over the 6-7 months, make any changes we need to, and then start selling those kits to the public, to the people that reserve the kits.
That is fantastic. I love that. And I mean, being able to, as a consumer, benefit from some of the, some of the design, some of just the ideology that you're using when you're going behind and you're building these trucks and stuff, and benefiting that now as well to, some of the consumer side of things, the automotive sector rather than the large heavy duty equipment sector. I mean, it's fantastic. Now, you've also got, if I'm not mistaken, a network of installers too that you're building up as well, right?
Yeah. So we had like 100 people reach out and said, hey, I want to install it. And we pretty well stopped it there. I couldn't believe how many people, because I came out and said, hey, we're not going to be able to grow this as a massive thing. We would need billions of dollars to expand. But we said, hey, if you are interested and you want to sign up and you want to get one of the first kits, so some people signed up to be installers. We said, we'll come to our shop. We'll train you up when we're installing these first kits, and we'll just keep training people as we keep building more and more kits, bringing people in it, and train them on how to work on it, how to service it, how to install it for other people that want it. And then we can keep growing out there, because one of the things that does scare me about this is that I see electrification as a way that these big companies are shutting down the small shops.
Mm-hmm.
Like small owner operators. They're making everything. You can't work on electric vehicles. No. It's scary. It's batteries. It's electric. It's dangerous. You can't work on it, so only our shops can work on our own vehicles. Oh no, you're out of business because we're mandating that all vehicles be electric by 2035 and then you can't work on it. So, oh no, I guess all these shops have to go out of business, and we're going to be the only ones that have mechanical shops that work on people's cars. Oh no, it's so unfortunate. They're full of shit. They know that they're doing that intentionally, and a part of the things is we said if we're doing the kit, and we're doing these trucks, number one, it's great for us because then people can work and service and we'll get more sales. But also, as a fundamental core, if we start training up these kits and we start making these kits repairable, well, then it saves all those automotive shops. So we had people sign up, and we can't take any more until we get these ones trained. So sorry if other people are interested. We'll keep working on that over time to hopefully keep growing, but we're only so small. But that's the plan, is that we'll get people installing these. So when the large at least it serves as a hedge. When a large manufacturer puts out a electric pickup and says, you can't work on it, it's only going to be able to last this long, you can't swap or change the batteries, or if you do, it'll cost $60,000 to change the batteries, you might as well buy a new one. Someone can say, at least have the option to say, screw you, I'll just go get an Edison and I'll keep that Edison for 15 years. We want to at least have that as an option, because even having that option will help keep them in check.
Absolutely. And I think as more consumers are aware of what is going on with the big manufacturers and how it's different with Edison, I think a lot of people, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, of course I want to be able to work on my truck. Of course, even if I don't want to work on my truck and I want someone else to do it, I want to be able to pick from any mechanic, any grassroots guy. I've got a local guy in town I know. I want him working on it instead of the dealer. Having that choice is so important. And I think what you're doing with Edison is showing the contrast. This is how it could be done. This is how we are doing it. But this is how the rest of the industry is doing it. And you're highlighting that with, I mean, at that point, that is just some like black and white contrast in two different ways to approach this. And I love the way you're doing it.
Thanks. It's it would have been easier to go the other route, but
well, Chace, again, I think there's so much great stuff going on. I could have you on for another 2 hours here on the show, but I know you're a busy man. Like I said at the top of the show, you're probably like one of the busiest guys in the universe right now. So I really want to thank you for coming on Automotive ADHD. And before you go, tell folks how they can find you again, the websites, the social, how they can go get a t-shirt, how they can put a reservation in on an electric conversion, all of that.
Yeah, we got our website. It's edisonmotors.ca. There's some pickup kit reservations. We closed the store because Theron's our media guy and his wife does the merchant all the shipping. And they just got married and they're on their honeymoon. So we shut the store down so they wouldn't have to stress about a ton of orders when they get back. But we got the pickup reservation kits. And if people want to check us out, we're on TikTok. YouTube, though, is great. We do make money off of YouTube. We make about $10,000, $10,000 a month off people watching our videos, and even just watching our videos and sharing and subscribing and liking the videos to promote it to other people so that other people see the videos helps us a lot because it brings in revenue. That keeps 2 more people employed right there just from the YouTube. So even if they don't go in the store, watching and liking that keeps 2 more guys going to help out.
I love it. Hey, support Edison Motors. And, you know, next time you see a company like Edison as well come along too, hey, give those guys some love as well. But I think really what you're doing is very unique right now, and I wish more folks were doing it. But again, I can't thank you enough for coming on my show today.
Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Awesome. Thank you. And hey, if this is your first time hearing the show, be sure to check out the podcast of The Radio Show. This is a show that happens every single week, Saturdays at 9 a.m. on several great radio stations in Colorado. I'll talk to you next week on The Radio Show.